All right, guys, here we go. While we're talking about bird meters and line sections and that sort of thing, figured I would do this little video here. Get our lighting over here a little better. We got a few different elements here in front of me, and some people ask me questions about this sometimes about what difference it makes, the frequency that's on the slugs or the elements. For those of you guys that don't know, we use pretty much two different frequency ranges for CB: 25 to 60 megahertz and 2 to 30. Now, I don't have a 2 to 30 sitting over here beside me. Well, maybe I do. Let's see. Out of my slugs, maybe I'll have one I can show. Okay, so yeah, there you go. So there's a 2 to 30 in there. Got a couple of 2 to 30s, I guess. But you can use either one. I don't care what people say. I've already disproven. Some people would say, oh, you can't use these 25 to 60s or you can't use 2 to 30s. They read pretty much the same. Matter of fact, you can have two of the exact same element or slug, and they can show different power. So, maybe somewhere along the line, someone had a 2 to 30 that read loose, and somebody had a 25 to 60 that read tight, and they thought, you couldn't use one or the other, but you can use either one. 27 megahertz falls in the frequency range for either one of these. Okay, Bird wouldn't tell you it's good for 27 megahertz just so they could beat CBers out of their money. 25 to 60, 27's at the beginning. 2 to 30, 27's at the end. But that's not what we're really talking about. What I want to talk about is, and I have seen this, especially people using them for reflected power, is something like this. Now, they'll have the right slug on the output side, but a lot of people will use these 100 to 250s, or, I don't know if I've ever seen anybody use a 400 to 1,000, but, 50 to 125, I've seen that quite a bit to be used as a reflex slug. And you're probably wondering, well, why the hell would anybody do that? Why don't they just buy the right slug in the first place? Well, these are a lot cheaper. 25 to 60 megahertz and 22 to 30 are the most expensive elements you can buy. For whatever reason, I'm not really sure what the deal is behind that. They're made out of the same material. Maybe just because they think if they're going to deal with CBers, they're going to make money off of it, whatever. But 2 to 30 and 25 to 60 are the most expensive. And it may be just because there's a lot more of these type out there too. I have no idea. But what I want to do is show you guys the difference, power output wise, if it even makes a difference. Is it worth spending the extra money to get the right slug the first time? So let's check it out and see what we get into here. Let's see, I'm going to pause this and set it up on the stand. That way I don't have to be shaking and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So let me pause the video, guys. We'll be right back here. We'll get set up. That way I'm not having to jerk the camera around. Okay, guys, we're back, and hopefully I can do this. I'll have to straddle around my camera a little bit here, but hopefully I can do this, and it'll be easier for you guys to watch rather than the camera jerking all over the place. All right, so first one up is our man, 25 to 60. And there's really no need to do PEP. Let's just do average power to keep it simple. This is going to be our base measurement. We know this slug is fairly accurate. So 3.5 watts out of our 25 to 60. Batter up. Say first 100 to 250. So about a watt, maybe a little more. So it's reading about a third of the power. All right. So we know 3 watts is actually 1 watt on that one, or a watt and a half, or not a watt and a half, definitely, but a watt and some change maybe. Next one. Same thing. Just a prettier slug. And it actually reads a little less. The other one was just over a watt. That one reads pretty much dead on a watt. Okay. This is a 5 watt. I don't expect this one to read 400 to 1,000. I really don't expect this one to read. It's way out of range. Make sure it's in there good. Hello. 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 Okay. It's reading, but I had to make sure it was in there good. Thought we had a dead slug for a second. But I wouldn't have been surprised if it didn't read. So that one's way off. I mean, we're reading like 1/4 of a watt out of it. So that one's way off. Last one, I just want to do this for the hell of it. This is a 50 watt, 50 to 125 megahertz. Now, for a bass, we know this radio from previous tests. It does about 10 watts average and about 35 PEP. Some slugs will show it doing a little more, some will show it doing a little less, but that's the ballpark. So, matter of fact, we can compare it to my 50 over here. I wasn't even thinking. We'll compare it to my 50 and see what it does. Now, this is a different megahertz. This is 50 to 125. So let's see what we get here. Middle scale. Hello. What's that, about 8 watts with a... Now, wouldn't you know the dead key shows accurate on it? That's pretty crazy. Or pretty accurate anyway. It's showing a 3 watt dead key. Hello. And about 8 watts average. Hello. Audio. This will be my buying slug here. It shows about 28 watts PEP. All right. Let's put in my 50. All right, this is my 50 water. And I've got 2 of these. I've got a 25 to 60 and a 2 to 30. This one reads a little more snug. This one reads a little more free, the one to the right. It's not a big deal, but just putting that out there. Back in focus there. What are you doing? All right, let's see how this one reads. All right, PEP. Hello. So it reads about 40 PEP. And it shows about 4 watts dead key versus the 3 that everything else has been showing. Hello. About 10 watts average. All right, for the heck of it, we've done this before, but let's do it again. Let's take my 2 to 30 or my 25 to 60 black slug. And I know it reads a little snug. Let's see how it reads. Okay, it still shows about a 4 watt dead key. Hello. Average power is pretty close, maybe a half a watt less. PEP. Hello. It shows about 2 watts less. So there you go. That is the difference in all these. And let's talk about it a little bit here. Let's get our elements back over here and do a little recap. What are you? All right. Zoom out. Okay. So here's our elements that we tested with here. For better or worse. What do you guys think? You think there's ever any reason to use a different slug? I'll give you my opinion on it, and I don't know that I ever would unless I guess was in a pinch and just didn't have any. But here's my thoughts. If you're only using them for reflect, And especially if you already have a reference, like you know that 3 watts on this thing is actually 10 watts, or 9 watts rather. You know that 1 watt on here is 3 watts. I wouldn't be opposed to somebody using these for reflected power. I don't think it would be that big a deal. Now, that said, if you're tuning an amp for maximum output, I don't think it would be a good idea to use the wrong element. I wouldn't necessarily be a fan of that. I think you're asking for trouble. You're kind of pushing it to the limits there. But using one for reflected power, I mean, here's the thing. We know that this slug was showing 3 watts, 3 watts and maybe a little more, and that these were showing 1 watt. I think that would be fine. Okay. If you want to save a little money and you don't want to spend, outrageous amounts just for reflected power slugs, maybe something to think about. But hopefully, regardless of how you feel about it, this answers your question. Yes, there is a difference. There's a reason that they have these labeled for different frequencies. It's not just for the hell of it and to squeeze people for money. They actually do show different output. So there you go, guys. Hope that answers any questions you have. Rooster in 10, roostercb.com. See you, bye.